Today with Claire Byrne on RTE Radio 1.
€100 million, that's how much the state spent on subsidising fee-paying schools last year. Not everyone is happy about the taxpayer funding private schools, including my next guest, Fianna Fáil TD for Dublin North West, Paul McAuliffe, who's on the line. Good morning to you, and thanks for joining us, Paul.
Good morning, Claire.
We're also joined by Barbara Ennis, who's the principal at Alexandra College, which is a fee-paying school. Good morning to you, Barbara.
Good morning, Claire. How are you?
So what, firstly, Paul, are you saying about this? What is your issue with fee-paying schools being subsidised by the state? Is it purely about the cash?
Well, look, it isn't, because I think it's a far more complex question than that. And it's also not about demonising parents' right to send their children to a fee-paying school or to many of the issues that fee-paying schools answer, for example, issues around religious ethos and so on. But what it is about is the state's priorities. And we know that when we invest in the public education system, all of society benefits, whereas when we invest in the fee-paying system, only some of society does. And I think that's a question. We're heading into budget week now, Claire. The question is, if this proposal was being put to the Minister for Public Expenditure for the first time this week, would we really make a decision to subsidise fee-paying schools, or would we invest in our public system? And I think we have to look at other countries and how they've done this, and it needs to be done over time. But I think we can transition to investing more and more in a system that everyone has access to.
So you want to see the 100 million going into non-fee paying state schools?
Well, it actually might cost a little bit more. It might cost the state more, because obviously the funding that's currently going into fee-paying schools is less per capita than into public schools. But as I say, when you invest in public schools, all sectors of society benefit, and everyone has access to the investment of that school. But when we invest in a fee-paying school, it's a self-selecting issue. Only some people have access to it by virtue of the fees paid.
You've gone further than that, though, in talking about this in the past, and you have suggested that what this is condoning segregation, social segregation.
Yeah, I think certainly that in my constituency and in many other constituencies, there are schools that have real challenges in their classroom. They have issues around maybe parents who are homeless, parents who have addiction. There's issues of children with autism. There's literacy issues, and all of those challenges make up the complexity and the difficulty of principals running a private school, a public school. And they are distractions from the provision of education that fee-paying schools generally don't have. And so there is an issue that if you pay your €7,000 or €8,000 to a fee-paying school, then you're able to send your child to an education environment that doesn't have those issues. And there's a question there for the state about whether they wish to put their money into that system or into a public system that's accessible to everyone.
All right, but let's see what Barbara thinks of all that now. Barbara, condoning social segregation, what do you make of that comment and Paul's general point that the state just shouldn't be funding fees-paying schools?
Well, I think he's made a lot of very valid points there, but I think really social segregation is a much more complicated matter than just pointing at fee-paying schools. I also wonder if Paul's comment is politically motivated, and if it's an easy
of course it is, Barbara.
gatherer.
Of course it is. But not for votes, because we're responsible for directing public spending, and so everything that we do has to have a societal impact. We have to assess it. We all have different priorities.
Let's hear what Barbara means by politically motivated.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so what I mean by politically motivated is the timing is very handy. It's always around this time of the year that this issue comes up. For as long as I've been principal in the school that I'm in and the previous school I was in, September and October were always the times when this question was asked, should we be supporting fee charging schools? So in terms of social segregation, I think we've a lot bigger issues to look at that are at the root of social segregation rather than fee charging schools. They're an easy target. I mean, for example, in my own area here, there are a number of non-fee charging schools that parents choose to attend who are from the exact same socio-economic background as our own parents. But because they can afford to buy a house in this area, they can afford to access a really very good school, which isn't a fee charging school. And that is not fair, and it is not comparable with somebody who lives in a socio-economically disadvantaged part of the country. And so I think really the emphasis at the moment when we come to talk about social segregation needs to be at a much wider societal level. And, the housing crisis and the price of houses in the city centre is putting putting enormous pressure on young people and pushing them further away from the city.
Okay,
And coming
but
back to
why should the state pay to support fee-paying schools?
Okay, well, first of all, the only subsidy that we get is our teachers. And we've a higher teacher-pupil ratio than the non-fee charging sector. So I think the reason that the state should continue to support fee charging schools is a historical factor going back to Article 42 of the Constitution, which gives the right of choice to parents to choose the school that they wish to send their children to. They're also taxpayers as well. And also, in my case, in a minority faith education school, where students living in rural Ireland cannot access a school of their ethos, they have to send their daughters boarding. And therefore, the state really is obliged to support those children. Now, there is an SEC block grant which is available for parents to apply for, which subsidises the fees, but it very rarely covers, the full amount. But the other thing that I would say, which is really the most worrying, is that if we remove publicly paid teachers who are monitored by the Teaching Council and by the state from the fee-paying sector, we're just going to have a free-for-all in the fee charging sector, and we're also going to lead to further elitism where the fees will go up exponentially. Less people will be able to afford to send their children to those schools, but they will also still exist. They're not going to disappear if funds are taken away from them.
They'll just be a bit more expensive.
A lot more expensive. I would say they'd be probably 2-3 times the price they are at the moment. But
why should that concern the state?
Because, for the reasons I said, choice, Article 42 of the Constitution enshrines this right of choice to people, and also we need to look after our minority faith children who can't access in their locality the school they want to go to. So the state is obliged to them. But the other question I'd like to ask, Paul, is, is the state going to ban grinds? Private dance lessons, tennis lessons, extracurricular activities that parents choose to pay for, and attending state schools as well as fee charging schools. I think that's a much bigger issue.
Okay, let's put that to Paul then and get his response to that. Paul.
Okay. Yeah, look, I think it's important to come to the conversation not suggesting that we're banning anything, and I think I said that very clearly at the beginning. It does come back to the idea of where the state's priorities are. And in the main, fee-paying schools do have additional facilities, additional teaching resources. They have better levels of progression to third level. And the reason they have those things, and we know they have those things, is because that's what is sold to parents. That's why parents pay the €8,000 a year. If those things weren't in place, then the parents wouldn't make those choices. And the question is that, is it okay that the state is subsidising a sector where only some people have access to that better education?
Yeah, Paddy says, he's been in touch with us here, he says it's the other way around, Paul. Fee-paying schools subsidise the state because they pay for everything bar the teachers' salaries. Abolishing them would cost the state 100 million or more. If it's about equality, must we all have houses and cars the same size, or is this more political, populist nonsense?
No, and I think it's important. It's not about populism. It's not about pitching one sector of society against another, because as I say, come back, when we invest in our public system, everyone has access to it, regardless of income. So it's not about pitching one sector of society against another or one income group against another. But when we invest in a public school system, all of the community is there. All of the complexity. We just heard Roddy Doyle there. You talk about his teaching career and the complexity and the beauty that he wrote about in some of his books. That's the benefits of having a public school system that's funded and that's accessible to all. And when you have fee-paying schools where only some people can go to it, then those schools benefit from not having to deal with the challenges that public schools have to.
Is that the case, Barbara, that you don't have to deal with the challenges that the public schools have to face?
Absolutely not. I mean, all of those issues that Paul mentioned regarding socioeconomic background, all the various different learning difficulties are part and parcel of what we deal with every day. The other thing as well, I think...
Barbara, what would your level of progression? What would your level of progression to third level be?
Sorry, let me finish, Paul.
Okay.
What you have actually said there about fee charging schools is an insult to the wonderful non-fee charging schools who constantly top the leagues that are published in the newspapers. You know, there are schools local to me who do very well in the exams, and it has absolutely nothing to do whether they're paying fees or not. It's to do with the education of their family and the education usually of the mother. And if the mother is well educated, then the children will have ambitions to progress on. It's got nothing to do with the fee charging idea. Obviously, you know, we also have scholarships and bursaries that we distribute to students in DESH schools. So we have a number of students who have been successful in being brought into the school. So all of those issues and problems that you have mentioned are here and live and kicking in most of the fee charging schools. So I think it's disingenuous to say what you've said, and I also think I'd love to hear your opinion on, you know, what I said about housing, and also, you know, how we are going to make this change and make the state schools the very best that they can be, like they are in Finland. It took over 50 years to get there. And, you know, this is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction at this time of the year, and I don't think it's been really fully thought out.
All right, final word to you, Paul. We'll leave it there.
Well, look, I think this is about starting a conversation about where we're going with public education. Finland started somewhere, and my view is that we need to start looking at this issue now.
Paul McCall, Fianna Fáil TD, and Barbara Ennis, Principal of Alexandra College. Thank you both very much indeed.